Welcome to Magdi-AI Tutorials. I'm your host, Maggie, and I'm here to help you make the most of Magdi-AI, your software quality assurance AI assistant. This tutorial will cover how we can use MagdiSage, the information assistant, to gather information or do research. So let's get started. We're going to begin by clicking on the first agent button, MagdiSage. And we can use MagdiSage, as I mentioned earlier, to collect information or to help us do research. One of the things about quality assurance, or those of us who do software testing, a lot of times people just kind of trivialize it to think that we only do uh, software testing. We create tests, we execute tests, we report bugs, we test bugs, and it kind of reduced the role to that. But we all know that we have far more duties than just creating and executing tests. So let me begin by sharing a few examples of how we can use Magdi AI to help us with those non software testing tasks that we have to do. So let's start with a very simple question that we can ask. And of course, we can use ChatGPT to ask it, but let's see what Magdi AI will do. So I'm going to start with a very simple question. What's the difference between a test plan and a test strategy? So we click send and wait for a response. Now, one thing that we can acknowledge is that even seasoned QA people need a refresher course on terminology. I was teaching a workshop that was really based on this question with my previous teams of QA people. And I suggested to them on a new project, hey, you probably need to develop a test plan. And they said, a test plan or a test strategy? And I said, a test plan. And they were like, well, what's the difference? And so we ended up using that project to not only answer this question, but to actually put it in play. So Magdi AI gives us a response. And we can see here that it confirms the question that we asked just to make sure that it understands the question that it's responding to. And then it gives a summary response. So it's giving you the quick gist. A lot of times I find with ChatGPT, which is a fantastic tool, is that it can kind of overwhelm us with information when we ask a question. Magdi AI will give you the quick gist and kind of define it for you. So it gives you the basic information that you require. Because sometimes we just want to know the basic answer. However, if we require additional information, it will share the links that it used so that you can kind of use that to gain further information. For example, you may want examples, you may want a template. So you can kind of use um, Magdi AI and the links that it provides in order to gain additional information if you require it beyond the summary that it provided you. So if we click the back button, we can check our usage information line and we can see we consumed one token. So we are allotted 20 tokens per day. It resets daily, and thus far we've used one. So let's go back into Magdi AI and let's ask another question, a different type of question. So with this question, we're going to ask Magdi AI, hey, as a QA tester, How do I run my Selenium test scripts from Jenkins? Please provide simple step by step instructions. So, you may have a set of simple automated tests. You want to be able to create a job in Jenkins. Maybe you're not very technical and you want to be able to do it yourself. So, we can ask Magdi AI to help us with those instructions. A lot of times we do kind of rely on, if you're a manual tester, you kind of rely on your test automation team, a developer, a DevOps person, or even the IT person to help you. As we know, although we're hired into one role, we end up being kind of a little bit of a jack of all trades. And oftentimes, I don't know about you guys, but I've also been in situations where I needed result faster than what the people I'm depending on can deliver. You know, you have to kind of think about it that they have their jobs too. And if you're talking about DevOps or you're talking about IT, they are trying to service the needs of the entire company and not just us. So if we scroll up, again, it's just repeating the question that we asked it, and then we're getting a response and summary, but we're also getting those step by step instructions. And here is kind of telling you or elaborating what you need to do in order to create your project in Jenkins and to execute it using Jenkins. We may say, oh, what's the purpose of that? And a lot of times, what really helps is that we can run our tests from Jenkins. It's a lot easier to kind of deploy it against different test configurations, or we may want to automatically kick it off after a new branch has been checked in. So we get these step by step instructions to guide us in setting up our job in Jenkins and giving us step by step instructions on how to execute it. One thing that you can do, if there's any step that it's not really clear to you, you can actually ask Magdi AI, hey, can you elaborate on that step for me? Can you break it down in simpler terms? I find that that helps when you kind of tell it, look, talk to me like I'm a kindergarten, because sometimes you just really, really need it in a simple way. Another thing that you can do if it helps, because we all learn differently, you can ask Magdi AI, hey, can you find a YouTube video where I can see a demonstration of how this is done? So you can see that she's very thorough. I end up calling Magdi AI she for some reason, but the AI will actually tell you even ways that you can trigger the job automatically, and even do a scheduling so you could see how often it should execute. Let's say you don't want to execute it every 5 minutes, or you don't want it to poll every 5 minutes. You can ask Magdi AI, no, I'd rather do it just twice a day, or once a day, or once a week, whatever your scheduling preferences are. It also will even elaborate pitfalls and quick fixes, which is also very important because we all know that no matter how great the instructions are, something does not work the way we would like for it to work. And we always end up having to resolve an issue. So, again, it also provides those links so you can kind of gather additional information if you like. And you can kind of see that it assumes that you're using the Selenium WebDriver and that's what you're using to execute the test. So it is assuming, first and foremost, that you have a bed of automated tests, and it's also assuming that you're using Selenium, and that's because of the popularity of Selenium. But if you said, hey, you assume Selenium, but we're actually using Cypress, or we're using Playwright, you can ask it to update the instructions based on the tool that you're actually using. So we're going to click the back button and again check our usage. And you can see now we've only used two, and we got very valuable information off of our two requests. So let's try something else that's a little bit more robust. So let's go back into MagdiSage. And this time, we're going to have a much longer prompt. Now, I'm not going to read this prompt word for word, but what I will do is try to give you a summary of it. So, what I'm asking it to do is describe that we are searching for a new test automation tool. This is something that either an established company will do when they're trying to mature their processes. Maybe they've been doing manual testing all this time and now they want to introduce automation. I myself have been doing automation since 1999. So in this day and age, it's 2025, and I am still shocked that everybody's not doing automation, but here we are. And now we're in the age of AI. And so, therefore, people are now beginning to take advantage of that to kind of help with not just their test development efforts, but also their test automation efforts. So, here we're asking it that, hey, we need to select a new tool. We are selecting a tool to test an online casino game. So I choose this type of game because I wanted to kind of seek out tools that would work with an online casino game, given the fact that it's going to have game elements, a lot of dynamic elements, a lot of moving pieces. So we want a good tool for that. We wanted to support multiple channels, such as different browsers, different devices. And then once it does that, we want to create a tool evaluation matrix and we want to give it the format. So here we're kind of describing the columns that it should have in the table. This is the information that we're interested in seeing. And then we're asking it to compare the most relevant tools discovered, fill in the details, and provide a short summary highlighting the top two or three recommended options. So I'm going to click send. And I'm going to scroll a little bit so that you can kind of have an opportunity to pause the video and really take in this prompt and how it's structured. And what we're doing here is using Magdi AI to help us save time when we have to do this exercise. Again, this is one of these exercises that people don't often think about when we're talking about QA analysts and software testers. Like anything, a lot of times we don't have in depth understanding of everything that another person does in their job. But when we're actually doing um, this type of task where we're evaluating a tool, we're not just evaluating a tool for ourselves as far as what's the best tool for us to use. We actually have to justify any cost associated with the person who manages the budget. And a lot of times the cost is not just in the tools that you buy. If they have any licensing costs, you also have to look at the soft costs related to the manual labor in utilizing those tools to get the solution that you desire. And that kind of reminds me of a funny story that when I began doing test automation, I was using a tool called Silk Test by Segway, and they would sell the tool as it was something that could do all of the work for you when you're talking about developing automation. Oh, you can record and playback, and it's so simple. It makes testing easy. It wasn't that easy, but they would sell to management who really didn't have a detailed understanding of what it took to automate. And at that time, there wasn't any classes offered. So it was basically baptism by fire. You kind of learned on your own. So I would spend my day doing automation. And then before I would leave at night, I would run the tests that I had updated or I had added. And then one evening before I left, I overheard the CEO say, "What are we paying her for? The computer is doing all of the testing." And they had to explain to him, yeah, that's because she designs and develops all of those tests. And so he didn't understand that what I was doing was using the tool to not just develop tests, but also expand our scope of testing. And then that allowed me to kind of continuously run tests. As the developers made changes, as they released it to me, I could quickly run those tests and get the results. So part of being able to do that is not only choosing a great tool, but the tool has to be something your team can utilize. And you also have to consider the cost in them, not just utilizing the tool to develop the task, but you also have to think, okay, do they need any training? So you can kind of see based on the parameters that we gave, it created this table, it identified the tool name, it kind of outlined the parameters. It talked about the integration capabilities. You can see that it even selected some of the more popular tools like Selenium, which is open source, Test Complete, which is very expensive. It also looks at Cypress and Maestro, and it gives you a summary of those recommendations, and also it gives you the websites that it looked at in compiling that data. If you scroll over, you will see the rest of the information. So it actually kind of created a way of, and this is something I see as I'm demonstrating to you that this we can improve this so you can kind of scroll to the right using your cursor keys. And I apologize, we're going to work on that. But if you scroll over, you can kind of see that Magdi actually met the requirements. It created a table. It listed all of the information that you need to consider, and it also gave you a rating. And the rating should be based on the ease of use of this tool and how usable is it for the type of product that you're testing. So you can see that uh, a lot of them are kind of average, and then there's like one tool that rates as a 5 because a lot of the it contains a lot of the features you need for testing that type of application, and that's WebDriver IO. Now, there is one more tool that I know of that it didn't take into consideration, and what I can do is ask it to consider this tool. So I'm giving it a prompt and I'm saying, hey, I know about this tool called Appla Tools. Can you please review it and update the table to include this tool along with the evaluation? So as you can see, as great as the AI tools are, we still need to evaluate the response, make sure it's giving us the information back. It just so happened that I know about this tool, um, but it kind of should demonstrate that sometimes we need a couple of ways to do our due diligence at this stage of AI, because as you can see, it may not take into consideration everything that it should consider. And in my development efforts of Magdi AI, using AI as a way to do pair programming, that was something else that I noticed. Just because it proposed a solution didn't mean that it proposed the most optimal solution or the latest iteration of that type of solution. With AI, things are moving so fast. I mean, you blink and there's thousands of new tools out there for different purposes. It can get overwhelming, and everybody has a great idea. And of course, they're evolving the tools that we use. The LLM is getting evolved. The models that we're using are getting evolved. So it is a very fast moving industry, and so even with that, we can see that, sometimes, good old fashioned ingenuity, we need to complement it. So we can see that a little bit of time to perform that task. But the way I kind of see it, or what I was hoping to achieve with Magdi AI, is to really help QA optimize their time, especially when you're talking about sharing your time with the duties that are most important, which is the testing, but also kind of optimizing your time with other duties that you're required to do, such as tool evaluation. So you can see that it updated the matrix, it added Applet tools, it gathered the information required. You can see that it integrates with other tools like Selenium, Playwright, and Cypress, which is really cool. So if you already have a solution based on one of those frameworks, you can actually complement it with Applet tools. So you could see that it also provided additional information. So if you said, oh, this is great, we can kind of continue evaluating the information, there is a copy button here that allows you to copy this content, and you should be able to just pretty much drop it into an Excel spreadsheet. So you can see that it also has summary, it also has recommendations. So you can see it updated the recommendations because once it looked at Applet tools for visual coverage, it's saying, hey, you can pair Applet tools with one of these other tools that they feel is a great solution for online casino games. And you can see that it's saying that it catches the visual and layout of regressions across browsers and devices fast. This is especially valuable for casino UIs with rich graphics and animation. And so it all, it's kind of giving you its recommendation. It doesn't mean you have to go with that recommendation. You may have other reasons why you prefer to go with something else. Maybe you have a framework that is already built in another solution and you just want to complement it with Applet tools. But then you can say here, if you don't have any solution in place, you can actually consider the recommendations provided. All right, so I have one more final example that I want to share with you. And let me enter in the prompt. Let me scroll the screen so you can pause the video and get the full breadth of the prompt. But basically, in this last example, as a QA analyst, if you're working with online casino games, as an example, you might want to learn about the recognized certification programs or the regulatory bodies that are offered for certification. A lot of times, online casino games is one of those types of products where you have to meet the laws and regulations of the country or the jurisdiction that you're operating in. So let's say you're a very young online casino game, you're getting into that market space, and your CEO or your manager comes to you and say, hey, you know, we need to get certified. How do we do that? Who do we go to? So we can use Magdi AI to help us gather that information. And like the previous example, you can kind of see that not only do I ask for that information, I give it a list of criteria, specific information that I'm looking for. So we want to know what's the name of the program or the regulatory body, the geographic jurisdictions where it's valid, the type of games and platforms, what's the key certification requirements, the approximate cost, the timeline, and any other ongoing compliance or renewal. We also want to get any recommendation that the AI will give. So this is one of these tasks that a lot of times when we're being hired into a QA role, people don't think of these type of tasks that we must perform, and it often competes with our ongoing task of testing, developing tests, and other related tasks. So, and these types of activities can be very time consuming. So, Magdi AI, again, it confirms the question, it's giving you a summary response, but then it goes in and performs the task by showing you the certification programs or the regulatory bodies and the different um, information, each one of those pieces of information that you requested. So it's looking at, okay, this is the jurisdiction, this is what's usually covered in that jurisdiction with this regulatory body. Here are the key requirements. It talks about the fees, so you have that information, the timeline, um, how often you must do it. It talks about the pros and cons. So as you kind of scroll down, you can kind of see that it gives you a very exhaustive list. I know that this is a very popular one when it comes to casino games. And this is true whether you're a company that develops online casino style games or you're a company that develops platforms that host online casino games. So there's two types of businesses in this space that I'm aware of. And that's the ones where they don't develop any games. They basically develop the platform that hosts the games. And so they make contracts with the companies that do make the games. So on their platform, they may have games from several different vendors. And then there are the companies that actually make the games. So they don't host the games themselves. They don't have a platform where they host, they sell to the people who host the games. But either way, they both look into certification and the regulations as it applies to the game and also as it applies to the platform. If you're asking like what's the difference, as a company that develops the game, I'm more interested in developing the game and making it so that it can plug into a platform where I can get information like what's the user's balance. I can add or subtract from that balance. I can display it. I can show any bonuses, but it's the underlying platform that basically has a lot of the actual user data, and it allows the user to make payment transactions when they want to kind of add money to their account to be able to play the game, to actually make the bets and things like that. So, again, as you kind of scroll through, it actually goes through the various jurisdictions. It gives you that breadth of information that you asked for. It is structured. You can kind of scroll through it, and you have a very exhaustive list that you can kind of utilize to answer the question as far as what regulatory bodies should we seek certification from. And to be honest with you, the answer is going to be what jurisdictions you plan on operating in. So even though you got this very exhaustive list, you can kind of pick through and see which ones are applicable to your situation. And of course, your prompt can be refined so that you can say, provide the information for these specific locations and provide this information. So as you scroll down, it's going to give you the pros and cons as you requested. So it's going to say, hey, the pros are broadly accepted, faster throughput, reusable, and then the cons, of course, is the cost that adds up per title or jurisdiction. So there's a lot of coordination overhead. And I can speak from personal experience that I actually experienced that with a different type of product, but I remember the amount of time and effort working with the people that were actually executing the test. And although they were doing the testing, the coordination was not fun, to be honest with you. So here it kind of goes down and it gives you the quick recommendations that you need to take into consideration. And again, it also provides you a number of links in case there is any additional information that you want to take into consideration for your evaluation. So we could click back, we can check our usage information line, and so, therefore, we saw that we can use MagdiSage to answer simple questions, get refresher information on terminology. We saw that we can have it perform tasks such as help us get instructions on how to do something, such as um, let us run our tests from Jenkins. We can also use it to gather information and help us do tool evaluation or gather information for certification programs. So I hope this provides you the examples that you need to effectively use MagdiSage. And I really appreciate you spending time with me and happy testing.